Opportunity then to broaden out the discussion and leave Malaysia and look more at this relationship between Islam and politics, because it seems to be going through an extraordinary amount of flux at the moment. You mentioned the example of Egypt. We've seen really quite strident protests in Turkey against what is variously described as an Islamist government and not. It likes to say that it isn't, but a lot of other people say that it is. Do you think the relationship between Islam and democracy, but also just government generally, is improving? What will it look like in 20 years, 30 years?
Well, the Rabi' al-Arabi, this Arab Spring or Arab Awakening, was something which received with euphoria by the world, until now trampled by the dictators, and it is a temporary reprieve, but I believe it is irreversible. The trend towards democracy and reform in the Middle East is irreversible. In the last few months, I spent a lot of time meeting the groups in Australia. I'm traveling again, I think tomorrow night, to Istanbul, meeting the opposition groups from Egypt, Tunisia, Syria, and the rest. And the sentiment is there, very broad, very popular appeal for freedom, democracy. But the next question is, Waleed, is that compatible? Is that what the Muslims want? Indonesia is your neighbor. They had free, fair elections in 1955. I remember speaking in front of my colleague, my good friend Al Gore, the former Vice President of the United States. And I said, the elections in Indonesia in 1955 was more free and fair than the United States in Florida in the year 2000. All right?
He is, of course, a very impartial source on that.
So Al Gore was very pleased. I said, Anwar, I agree with you entirely on that. But the point is, there was no debate or question in Indonesia by the so-called Islamists or Islamic Party or the extremists on whether democracy is accepted or not. There was a huge, they call it debate or constituent assembly debate, that all is more inclusive. You know, the greatness about Muhammad Nasser and the Masyumi, the Islamic Party in Indonesia, is very inclusive. So you can't compare it to the Taliban type of a party. Only to be hijacked then by the secularist Sukarno. It's not an Islamist threat. Okay? Now could they have had elections, free elections? Iraq, similarly. Iran, Mossadegh, toppled by the CIA and British Petroleum and these companies. They have had that experience, okay, only to be hijacked at the later stage. We have had problems in Algeria because the concern by many, including Western governments in Europe, because once the Islamic or the Islamists win, then there will be one vote, one person, one time. So always that prejudice that say that no, you can't allow the Muslim parties to take over. I differ. You talk about democracy, you have a clear mandate, constitutional guarantees that is non-negotiable. In Malaysia, the coalition is, of course, the Justice Party, the Democratic Action Party, mainly majority ethnic Chinese, and the Islamic Party. A lot of questions raised. I said, you must make clear position in the constitutional provision. Freedom of conscience, freedom of expression, rule of law, gender equality, etc. Economic excellence with strong dosage of affirmative action, regardless of race or irrespective of race, and distributive justice. That must be spelled out, signed, documented, that cannot be renegotiated. And that is to be the formula. And most Muslims, even Muslim parties, have accepted that. But in the Middle East, those who have been familiar with the authoritarian dictatorial rules have very great difficulty in adjusting. I mean, for example, my experience in Malaysia, you have Indonesia changing. Probably Indonesia can be termed as the greatest transformation, or quite phenomenal, in a Muslim country in modern times. It's the largest Muslim country in the world, and the transformations have been relatively peaceful. Institutions are stronger. There's no fear or worry about a possible military coup or takeover, and that is, of course, very reassuring for the Muslim world. Wanid, you mentioned Turkey. Just because they have some measures which is pro-Islam should not be seen to be derailing the democratic process. We can choose to disagree with some of the policies, but what is the problem? Is a democracy. We have institutions in place, but you can't imagine that just because you are a Muslim country, you want to accept only when they become completely, they must even use the term secular. Turkey, they use the term secular. I don't. People ask me, then what do you want? Are you for an Islamic state? I say no. Are you for a secular state? No. What do you want? I want a modern state. It is what I mean. As I said to you, the freedom of conscience, freedom of religion. Because if you start debating the discourse of what an Islamic state is or secular state is, you have various interpretations. Unless this is, there's a clear understanding what we want, then we can use these terms. Otherwise, to my mind, dealing with the conservative Muslims and the progressive and the liberals, we have to avoid this sloganeering and engage in a discourse to really understand and reach a consensus of what we want. And to me, India, second largest Muslim country in the world, is there a debate among Muslims whether they want democracy or not? It's just accepted. So in terms of sheer number, and it is an excellent, from the days of Gandhiji, Mahatma Gandhi, preaching the issue of politics for conscience, we embrace the Hindus, the Muslims, the Christians, and they're part of that so-called process. Pakistan has this probably more difficult period after military coup. And so to my mind, the experience in Indonesia and Turkey is quite spectacular in terms of at least proving that there can be that process. The unfortunate experience, again, Iran, those days in the 50s, and Iraq, is that the initial attempt were only hijacked by the superpowers. And do not ever deny that. Because had they been allowed to do that, but because they were anti-United States, because of the oil and some other imperialistic designs, just because of that, they were derailed. And you see the extent of hardship that these countries has to endure is unbearable. And now Syria is, of course, a major tragedy of our time.